Lloyd Russell-Moyle, tell me about your background. Fairly middle class, but educated at state schools.
Yeah, I mean, local schools. My parents were teachers and engineers, so not wealthy, but comfortable off, you know. Usually former council houses that my parents had bought, or then later on, you know, kind of nice houses with nice gardens, that kind of thing. But local schools always. So the local primary school, which was a mixed kind of primary school, council estate on one side, former council estate on the other, posher housing on, you know, and the same with the secondary school, a good school, and then technical college, and always beyond school, education, but always working. So part-time education. So when I went to university, Bradford University, again, not a bad university, but not the top universities, you know, to call a spade, but I took 6 years to do my undergraduate because I worked alongside it, or I took time off to work because I felt, and I still do, that actually that's quite an important part of people's experience, to be able to not just be focusing on one thing, but to be able to be working and doing other things alongside.
Since you mentioned my hometown of Bradford, I have to ask you, have you ever had a better curry anywhere in Britain than in Bradford?
I don't think so, but I'm sure people in Manchester would dispute that, but I'm not going to get into the curry wars. That can be left to the British curry competition.
Were your mum and dad political?
Was I political? They were political in the sense of community-minded and community-spirited. My dad taught the local cricket club, you know, kind of. My mum got involved in a campaign to keep languages in primary schools when I was younger, and we all got involved in a campaign to save the local swimming pool, and that was a very big. My first remembering of political things was going door to door, getting signatures to save the local swimming pool. I don't think ever my parents, until I joined the Labour Party, were ever really party political. I mean, now my mum talks about when she was a student door knocking for the Labour Party, but when I was around, that wasn't something that was really about. We lived in a liberal, conservative, marginal seat, Lewis, you know, kind of. I guess for my parents, there wasn't a party that was going to take power any time that they would really get involved in. So the community was the important thing. If you didn't like something, you stood up and said you didn't like it.
When did you realise that you were Labour?
Well, the Woodcraft Folk, which was the organisation that I went to as a child and then became the chair of, which is
Just
kind of like an alternative scouting organisation, left-wing, sometimes accused of being a bit hippie, you know, kind of left the Scouts in 1925, so diverged from that, left because they believed in gender equality and pacifism at the time, although the time of history has meant that the Scouts have changed, and so the Woodcraft Folk. But that was always funded by the cooperative. And so as I worked up the Woodcraft Folk ladder, as it were, it was a natural line to join the Cooperative Party. So unlike most politicians that join the Labour Party and then join the Co-op Party out of convenience, I did it the other way around. I joined the Co-op Party because it was the co-op that funded the Woodcraft Folk. It was the cooperative principles that the Woodcraft Folk operated by, in terms of, you know, kind of, most of our groups operated above co-op shops, things like this. And so then that was the party that represented you, represented mutualism, represented working together, represented working for betterment of your community. And then I found out that the Co-op Party was linked to the Labour Party. And for
How
me,
old are you then at this
well,
point?
this is probably about 15, 16. And for me, that's a great shock. And I can remember at the time saying, well, surely it should just be aligned to whatever party is against the Conservatives in an area. Again, remembering I come from a liberal conservative area, not a Labour area. So it's only when I moved to Bradford, when I was then 18 or 19, that I really realised how the cooperative and Labour were hand in glove. And at the time, Bradford Council was run by a coalition of liberal conservatives to keep the Labour Party out. And they had decimated the roads, potholes all over the place, like local councils do. You know, kind of, the schools weren't doing well, they'd all been privatised. Bradford had the unfortunate effect of always voting the council the other way of national government. So the council went Labour in 2009, and a year later, of course, Labour left national government, and all through most of the Labour years, the council was Conservative. So it always gets overlooked by national politics. But that made me think, well, I want to get involved in local Labour politics, because they're the ones that are working with the co-op, and they're the ones working in communities. To me, community is the thing that you keep coming back to. How are you improving your local community, place and space, and how you live in your area? probably even younger than I realised. I knew that I liked boys before I knew the term was that it was gay, you know. And I mean, I can remember in primary school, a boy showing me The Sun, you know, kind of page 3 in The Sun, and me thinking, well, I prefer to see your bits than the bits in the paper at the time, you know, kind of. I didn't say that, but I can remember that image of him secretly showing me this thing, and me kind of thinking, oh, that's not really for me. So I always knew that that's what it was. And then it's a case of when you understand the label, and then when you understand that you are that. So I came out to my friends at secondary school, probably about 14, 15, and I was fairly comfortable about it. It's never been a big struggle. I've probably received more abuse for being ginger than I have for being gay. Now, Lewes is a nice middle-class town next to Brighton, which is quite open. I'm not saying that I haven't had any abuse sometimes, but actually, probably for other attributes of me, I've had more taunting.
Have you got a partner?
I had a partner for about 4 years until recently, and we're at the moment going through a discussion about what the future involves, as you all do.
As we all do. I really wanted to talk to you because you made this extraordinary speech in the House of Commons a couple of years ago. And you are the first member of Parliament to reveal that you are HIV positive in the House of Commons chamber in a parliamentary speech. What made you decide to do that?
Well, there were 3 reasons why I did it. I talk about some of the reasons in the speech. One reason is just a purely personal reason, is that actually keeping things hidden in politics tends to be the road to ruin. And there is always a danger. And Chris Smith, who had been the only ever MP to even talk about his HIV status, he announced it when he knew he was retiring, but also partly announced it because the papers had got hold of the story. And I felt like I wanted to be on the front foot. I wanted that burden off me. I didn't want to be having to look over my shoulder. So that was, and that's semi-selfish, you know, kind of, I just don't want to have to be doing with that grief. The other parts were that I felt that, and we are at a crux point where we could abolish HIV transmissions. And the government, not just because of me, but at that time, my speech added weight to a call that was growing that we should really commit to abolishing HIV transmissions in this country. And to kind of give you a sense of the numbers, just in Brighton, we've had about 20 people newly infected in the last year, but only 3 of them are new transmissions. The rest are all historic people that have lived with it and who didn't know. And out of those 3 that were new transmissions, they got it from people who were historic and didn't know. And so if we treat those people, once you're on treatment, you can't pass it on. And so it means that you stop being able to get new infections. And we could quite realistically, and Brighton's got a high number of HIV diagnoses compared to some other towns and cities the same size because of historic reasons in the community. We could really do that. We could really achieve that because those are the principles. If you are on treatment, you're undetectable. And once you're undetectable, you are untransmittable of that virus, and you can go around, you know, kind of, someone could have sex with you, they could exchange blood with you almost, and you would not be able to pass it on to them. And that's quite a miracle. It's a miracle of science compared to where we've got in 30 years. But equally, there's a danger that we dropped at the last hurdle, you know, kind of, so we said, oh, well, it's all sorted, we've got the drugs, and you don't quite deal with that final number of people that either are undiagnosed or for whatever reason, mental health drugs have stopped taking their medicine, and then they are a danger to themselves, but also a danger to the community. So how do we support them to make sure that we abolish this disease? And if we achieve that, first of all in Britain and then around the world, it would only be one of a few number of diseases we have managed to eliminate. And it would be the first disease we've managed to eliminate without a vaccine. So there's some really exciting things there. But the problem was, as with all things, government funding was tight. And I felt that we needed a final push to wake ourselves up to the possibility that was slipping through our fingers if we didn't take this moment.
Could you talk us through the moment you were diagnosed?
Oh, well, it was, I knew something was wrong immediately because they ring you up and they don't say, "Oh, it's all clear," or "There's no
Was
problem."
it a routine? Tell me.
It was. In fact, actually, I went in because I just had a rash. Could have been an eczema rash. I didn't really know what it was, and they said, "We'll take some blood tests," because it wasn't clearing up with the hydrocortisone you buy over the counter. "We'll take some tests." Then they got back to me and said, "Oh, your results have come back. We need you to come in to speak to you." And so immediately, you know, when they say, "We need you to come in to speak to you," well, there's something wrong here. And immediately you're kind of thinking, what of all the worst case scenarios? So HIV does flash through your mind because I was a sexually active gay man. And at the time, you're talking about huge numbers of infections in London. They've really gone down, but we were talking about 1 in 7 gay men in London were HIV positive at the time. This is 2004, 2005, 2003, that period, if I remember right. I was diagnosed, of course, after I got it. So we're talking about that time period, and so it flashes through your mind, and you go in and you get the result, and you kind of think this is some horrible joke. You wish it was a horrible joke. You kind of are begging for it to be a kind of nightmare that you wake up from, but it's not. And at that time, one pill has only just come in. So in most people's minds, it was still a death sentence, or it was still something very tragic. And of course, the doctor said, it's fine, you can have that 1 pill regimen, you could live as normal life as everyone else. I mean, now there's a plethora of drugs that you can, I started on the only one available that was 1 pill, 1 a day to keep you down. And I didn't start on those drugs straight away because the policy at that time was, we'll wait for you to get a bit iller. But now the policy is, as soon as you're diagnosed, you're treated, because as I said, once you're on treatment, you can't pass it on. So you become actually quite a safe person, and the risk is eliminated.
I'm just trying to do the maths. How old were you when you were going through this?
Must have been 19, 20. You know, I was at university. It was my second year at university. So I was in Bradford. It was the Bradford Clinic. You know, and they were very supportive, and my lecturers and tutors were very supportive. And I had to ring my parents, of course. And I remember my dad saying, "You stupid bugger." And he said it in a loving but frustrated kind of way. But as he's a man of kind of science and engineering, he went away and then did that research and then was sending me messages saying, "Oh, well, here's the latest research coming out. You could live as long as, you know, kind of." So there was always different people cope with it in different ways. And so you're not only having to cope with your trauma, you're having to support your friends and family around you there, and they're supporting you in this mutual kind of grieving, understanding kind of thing. And hopefully, I like to think I got through it, and my family got through it, but time is to tell.
When I was reading your speech, because you think that all the myths around HIV have basically gone, but I didn't know that through the pills you can't transmit it through sex.
Yeah.
How do we do enough to dispel the myths that even I had before rereading your speech last night?
Well, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because we don't want to go around saying, "Oh, don't worry about it anymore. You don't need to use any protection. We can just treat it with a pill." But equally, we want to dispel the kind of fear around it, so that we say to people, if you do have it, it's not a problem. If you don't want to get it, you can take a pill, a bit like the morning after pill. And this was the other argument the government was having. They were saying, if you take either the equivalent of what the morning after pill is, or the contraceptive pill equivalent of, so PrEP and PEP. PEP is the morning after, PrEP is the pre, that's why it's the pre-pill. You can also eliminate any risks from yourself. And it was about trying to persuade the government to roll that out as well, which we have now got. But there were some arguments at the time in government that if we give it to people, will it make them more promiscuous? Will it make them more liable for other diseases? And those are really difficult debates. Thankfully, we have come now to the debate, which is about what costs the least amount of money and what saves the most amount of lives. Well, it's about providing the medicine when you can. And in a wealthy country like ours, we can.
Fascinating. Thank you for being so open. You have, it was a very brave and moving speech, but there have been other controversies in your politics. I don't think that is controversial. I just thought it was just the most extraordinary speech that I have heard. Grabbing the mace, which is the symbol of royal authority, the mace in the House of Commons chamber. You grabbed that during the Brexit debates. You tried to stop Brexit. You were very, very keen to stop Brexit, weren't you?
Well, I come from a Remain seat, and I was a Remainer. I helped coordinate the Remain campaign in the area. And so for me, that was partly my democratic duty, was to do everything I can for my constituents to achieve what they wanted. But at the time, what was happening is there had been a deal agreed, a Brexit deal agreed. But Theresa May was so scared of her own side that she wasn't bringing it to us. And I felt like if we could have a vote on it, we could either agree it or amend it. You know, remember, other parliaments get to amend these kind of bits of legislation and find a way through that we could honour Brexit in terms of leaving the European Union, but for my constituents, still on a customs union, single market and close ties and possibly some sort of easy movement or free-ish movement. There was always restrictions on free movement, but we never really applied them here. That was part of the problem. Anyway, I felt like we could have done that, and she pulled the votes and didn't even allow to vote on it. Now, I might have lost the argument and lost the vote, but if you're not able to vote on something at all, that to me was a kind of an outrage at the time. I saw red, and I do sometimes see red, and part of the history of Parliament has been when people have seen red, how they protest that is they pick up the mace. They usually give it quickly over to the steward who returns it back, but it is a symbol of protest. It is effectively how our democracy was established. Oliver Cromwell picked up the mace and said, this is a rotten parliament that no longer has the right to govern because it is in the pocket of the king and not the people. Now, I'm not saying that I'm on the level of Oliver Cromwell. He did lots of awful things as well, but he also reformed and created a democracy that we have at the moment. But it has been done by Heseltine when he felt like the votes were rigged at the time, and that was probably true. It's been done by MacDonald when he felt that the votes were being rigged against his. And actually, I'm not even the last person to have done it, so I can't even say I'm the last person to have lived it. But I think the one thing is key, is that you can do it maybe once in your career, but you can't do it more than that. I probably lost my rag too quickly and did that. Some of the areas, the prorogation of Parliament and all that illegal stuff, I was proved right. Some of the areas, the public proved me wrong because they voted for what they voted for in the end in 2019.
Well, I've really enjoyed our time together. Lloyd Russell-Moyle, thank you for sharing the real you.
Thank you.